My name's Jeff O'Keefe. I'm the Executive Director of Zen Peacemakers. And we're so happy today to have Dr. Vinya uh, Ariyaratne joining us. I think our relationship with Vinya goes back many, many years. And so this is just a real pleasure and a real treat. I'm going to go ahead and hand the microphone to my good friend Idis Katz in Tel Aviv to make introduction for Vinya and to get us started in our program. But once again, thank you all so much for joining. It's nice to see you, and hopefully we will have some time for questions. So keep a note if you have a question. Idis, would you like to take over?
Yes. Thank you very much,
Thank
Jeff.
you,
And thank you. I'm really excited to have this session today, honoring Dr. A.T. Ariyaratne's life and contribution to his country, to the world, and to the ideas and path of peacemaking based on his Buddhist practice and faith. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you, Vinya, Dr. Vinya, Ariyaratne's son. And thank you, Tani, my partner, for being with us as well. So today we will start by me. I will share my personal experience and relationship with Ariyaratne. I will try to present his main Buddhist principles as I have heard from him and their implementations to his peacemaking vision, also mentioning shortly their influence on me and my peace work here in Israel, Palestine. Later, my dear Vinya, you will talk about Ariyaratne's life, or your father's lives, and about the movement of Sarvodya that he established and led during so many years. Tani will talk about launching Sarvodya's Institute for High Learning, and Vinya, you will talk about Ariyaratne as a local and as a global leader, and conclude maybe sharing for us your experience and relationship with your dear father as his follower, and much more. I do hope that we will have time for comments from people in the audience. So for me, Ari was a great leader, a teacher, a mentor, a friend, a model. I came to know him when Tani, my partner, and I were hired to partner with a local community-based national organization in Sri Lanka to help to rebuild or reconstruct Sri Lanka after the huge disaster of the 2006 tsunami. This organization happened to be Sarvodya, with A.T. Ariyaratne initiating and leading for many years before. Since then, we arrived at Sri Lanka for work 3-4 times a year during more than 10 years. Then less often, we return to Sri Lanka as volunteers. When I have deepened my interest in Buddhism, and especially in peacemaking, in social engaged Buddhism, he became a leading mentor for me in my social action, and especially in understanding his vision about peacemaking, vision that became the beginning of my peace work here in Israel, Palestine, followed later by Bernie and the Zen Peacemakers. All of that based on numerous of interviews, road trips, visiting villages together, talks, working together, reading together drafts that he wrote when he was sick with high fever, getting his feedbacks about my practice, and getting his constructive criticism, and finally bringing him here to Israel, visiting Israel, Palestine, and supporting peace activists here in Israel, Palestine. Just to mention that Ariyaratne, maybe Vinya, you will tell us about it, maybe, I don't know, no. The Ariyaratne came to Israel years ago in order to study the way of collective life in kibbutzim in the desert, and also agricultural stuff many, many years ago. So I remember Ariyaratne, small figure, dressed in white sarong, with brown sandals, very devoted to his family. And when not mentioning a piece of Dharma, teaching something, quoting Avalokiteshvara or Tolstoy, you could hear his giggle from very far. He used to live with his wife nearby the Sarvodia campus, surrounded by his children and grandchildren. Once he taught me the difference between his commitment to his family and my attachment to my son, for example. Some other time, he would tell me his secret about keeping sweets. I don't know, Vinya, if you know about it, but now maybe it's okay to discover his secret about keeping sweets in his bedroom for his grandchildren to come and visit him. Some other time, he would say that we in the West think that Buddhist practicing is in retreats and meditation. No, no, but the real practice is letting go our attachments and greed. When speaking about non-violence or ahimsa, he told me that he would never kill anyone that attacks him, and he was attacked more than once. And even taking the risk of being killed. I learned a lot from him about civil courage in time of war, conflict, and political crisis, which is an important model for me nowadays in my region. Civil courage. He taught me not to be afraid and feeling safe in visiting the so-called dangerous and hostile Palestinians, in quotation marks, of course, in the West Bank or Palestine. He said, go there, don't be afraid. Nobody will do you any harm. I would like to mention his principles, the Theravadic Buddhist principles as he expressed them for me, and as he applied as a background to his vision, work, and action. Also, later on, for his peace, in my understanding, his peacemaking vision. So first of all, it was very important for him to say that Buddhism is scientific theory. The causality principle and the Four Noble Truths as presented as the basic scientific foundation of Buddhism. It is science, suffering as an issue for realizing and exploring the causes of suffering, possibility for coping with suffering, the way to reduce suffering by coping with its causes. In his point of view, it represents the scientific element of Buddhism as it is always focuses on causes or reasons of problems. Ariyaratne perceived the Four Noble Truths as coping with individual and collective suffering which is the cause of conflict, of course. He is always referred to the way, Eightfold Path, of which he is addressing all the elements as an everyday practice, way of life. Then he used to speak a lot about selfless and coexistence. For him, it is all about egolessness. Egolessness is a condition of pure mind, which is necessary to advance peace and prevent conflicts. Awakening. He referred to awakening as development. Of course, meaning develop a gradual process of development. I believe that you will develop the issue of development as awakening. Then Sarvodaya and Bodhisattva. Sarvodaya meaning well-being to all, inspired by Gandhi. This is also I live for you, Vinya, which is advanced by practicing the Bodhisattva way. And last, not least, but there are more, but only to mention the Shramadana and generosity. Shramadana, the name of the movement is Sarvodaya Shramadana. Shramadana and generosity. Shramadana means a gift. We know Dana of work, gift of work, which is Shrama. Shramadana, gift of work, focused on reducing hunger, sickness, building wealth, education, and such. Also, causes of conflict. It means commitment to social action, which is based on volunteering, a process of doing for all, including all sentient beings, following the Buddha way, and sharing of resources. Sharing of resources. It means also social activities, expressing compassion. And then about my understanding about his peace philosophy. Based on these Buddhist principles taken from the Theravada tradition, Ariyaratne emphasized peace as a natural state of being. For him, peace is a natural state of being based on stability, equality, non-violence, coexistence, impermanence, and the fulfillment of people's basic needs, including dignity and respect. For me, I'm emphasizing including dignity and respect because for me, it was so important in my peace work with Palestinians, of course. That is why for him, it was important to create and know poverty and uplift and empower disadvantaged people in Sri Lanka. As such, peacemaking is an ongoing practice in times of conflict, as well as in times of non-conflict, in order to prevent and avoid it. Ariyaratne emphasized that it is not about conflict resolution, and it is not about building. He said peace is not a building. It is about making peace and a process which happens from grassroots up. Side by side with the practice, Ariyaratne focused on development work and action in his movement called Sarvodaya. He implemented a holistic approach from the individual to the national level through the interaction of 6 dimensions, including spiritual, moral, cultural, social, economic, and political empowerment. Once achieving peace on the individual, family, and village levels, gradually growing into regional, national, and world. So in his quoting his word, Sarvodaya means the awakening of all, from an individual human personality to humanity as a whole. This awakening as spiritual, moral, cultural, social, economical, and political dimension, whatever we do in one of these sectors influences all the others. Based on the Buddhist practice in a parallel process to the external state, peace is a state of mind reflecting inner peace with no desire, no attachment, and no fears. In order to sustain this state of harmony, he recommended to practice morality, meditation, compassion, loving kindness, and personal responsibility. And only to give an example, and I will finish. Arya exemplifies the implementation of the 4 Brahma Viharas, the sublime attitudes, in the way he practices his strive for personal awakening, because we are talking about personal awakening, which is the personal development. We are talking about family awakening or development and such. So he referred to metta, the loving kindness, as a respect for all sentient beings, karuna, the compassion, as the strategic, well-planned action to reduce the roots of suffering, mudita, for him it is the sympathetic joy, but for him it is happiness, it is the immediate outcome from your doing good as well as from doing good for the others. Like, for example, when he was talking with me, he would say, you see, you have your questions, I'm answering your question out of compassion, and I'm happy with that. And upekkha, equanimity, is the thrive towards a balanced personality which is not totally shaken from momentary changes. So these peace practices are crucial for fulfilling the basic needs of all the members of the community, as well as all as for building the mechanism bridging between the different ethnic groups in Sri Lanka, like, for example, mass inter-religious peace meditation, cross-cultural activities, and so very important, mutual learning of languages and more. Languages of the Sinhala and Hindu, for example, in Sri Lanka. So for me, this is the core of the vision of peacemaking. Peacemaking, for me, as I learned from Ariyaratne, peacemaking is a path directed to bottom up, development and change from grassroots, from the people upward, maybe to the government this was the wish, based on consciousness training, ongoing social action, and improvement community for gradual growth of self-sustainability. I also learned that beginning with small action, with one person or a small group of people, is beginning with one village when he was still a teacher, building later on a movement of 15,000 villages, inshallah, in Israel, Palestine. He also told me to find partners. He always used to say, Iris, go and find partners in Israel, in Palestine. There are people who want to make peace. Find them out of both sides. And also remember that it is also always an optional possibility. So this is my Ariyaratne. And now I invite you, my dear Vinya, please tell us whatever you know about your father life, maybe with landmarks or turning points or events that made a difference for him and influenced his vision and perspectives and actions. And thank you again for being with us, dear Vinya.
Thank you, Iris, and thank you for initiating this remembrance and also this discussion to honor my father. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. And I would like to thank Zen Peacemakers also, Jeff and Chloe, for facilitating this meeting. And it's my great pleasure and honor to speak to you this evening. So Iris asked me about my father's sort of legacy and how I see the way forward. So right now we just it has been 3 months since my father passing away. So as you all heard from Iris, Sarvodaya is based on Buddhist principles, but my father has been able to articulate these Buddhist principles in a very practical way for ordinary people to be able to relate to their own setting, their own reality, and work towards fulfillment of basic human needs and transcending ethnic, religious, linguistic, and cultural divides that are there in our country. So it is asked me to touch a little bit on his own, my father's own background, his upbringing, and his childhood also. So my father was born in the southern part of Sri Lanka in a rural village. He came from a middle class family in a very, very rural village, which is a Buddhist village, and he grew up as a child with the direct guidance and influence of the temple, and he was educated in one of the schools in the same area in Gaul, and then he was trained as a teacher. He was a graduate in both science and social sciences, and then he started teaching in a Buddhist high school in Sri Lanka in late 1950s, and that's how he started the Sarvodaya movement, because from childhood he had seen poverty, and he had seen the exploitation of the poor people by those who control the economy, the local economy, to those who are in power. And at the time when Sarvodaya movement was started, it was 10 years after Sri Lanka got independence from the British. We became an independent nation in 1948. And there was a government which was, of course, we are happy that education and healthcare are given free in Sri Lanka. So it was a welfare state that we inherited. However, the governance in Sri Lanka was always having serious problems. So though we were a very multi-cultural, multi-ethnic, multi-religious society, we couldn't get our polity right to unite the country. That's why 50 years later, we had a very bloody civil war, a separatist movement which tried to divide Sri Lanka, which ended up many lives being lost and a lot of property being also damaged and livelihood damaged, and leaving deep scars in all communities of Sri Lanka. So Sarvodaya was born in 1958 in this context of a post-independent Sri Lanka, looking for a direction in development. So the Buddhist philosophy and the Gandhian thinking very much influenced my father's articulation of a movement that, it is referred to, starting with the concept of awakening. So awakening of yourself, starting with awakening yourself, then your family, then your urban community, rural communities, then urban communities, then country as a whole, and the world, which we call Vishvodaya, or global awakening. And that awakening has to happen in spiritual dimension, also cultural and moral. And based on this foundation, strong foundation of spiritual and moral dimensions, we build the social, economic, and political systems. That was how he articulated. And initially, it was completely a voluntary movement for 2 decades, mobilizing local resources, going from village to village, what we call harnessing labor, shramadana, sharing of your labor. So it was not confined to sharing of labor to build something that is going to be beneficial to the community, but also sharing your thoughts, sharing your compassion, sharing your land. So the movement really mobilized local resources, and in hundreds and thousands of people in communities got together. And so literally this initial stages of the movement was concentrating on building roads, because the road access was very limited in 50s, 60s, and 70s in Sri Lanka. So by coming together, the communities could build a road, but it was planned in such a way that it brings out humanity, compassion, all the principles like the Brahma Viharas, or 4 sublime states that are described in Buddhism. Loving kindness, you translate it into action, which is karuna, and then you get a joy out of it. mudita, but you have to also face both happiness and sadness and gain and loss. So you have to have a balanced mind. So these principles were practiced in these work camps, which lasted from few days to sometimes 2 weeks. So the movement emerged as a volunteer movement fulfilling basic needs in communities where all groups in villages, from children to youth to women, adults, farmers, everybody could participate. So in the third and fourth decades, the movement became, it had a organizational structure developed with district centers, educational centers. So education became a central part of Sarvodaya, development education. So hundreds and thousands of leaders, village people, also from the urban communities, youth, they were trained to become leaders of transformation. And then starting with social development work, it went entered into economic development. So my father's vision was to create self-sustaining rural and urban communities, decentralized governance, devolved governance called Gram Swaraj, self-governing communities. So village societies were formed from 1980s to enable the village community themselves to practice democracy. There is a constitution for these village societies, and they practice, they can elect their own officials, and they can do the planning for their own villages, do needs assessment, for which we assist as an organization with training and other forms of support. And where when they mobilize their own resources, you still need assistance from outside, technical assistance, financial assistance. So we mobilize donor funding locally or from outside, and it became a very sustainable people's movement. And then, of course, the movement's philosophy and action were quite well received in other parts of the world as well. So people came to learn from our work. At the same time, we were also exposed to other experiences of successful models of development, and there had always been international relations. That's how during just after the tsunami, we were able to link with groups from Israel and also from United States who came to share the pain with us, but at the same time to rebuild with partnerships. So we have had from 2004, when this disaster happened, we had many organizations. That's how we got connected to Iris and Tani and many other friends from Israel. And also we later, after the war ended in Sri Lanka, we had also community leaders from Palestine, those who were working in refugee camps in Jordan. They came and they stayed with us for about 2 weeks and learned about our way of how we look after civilians, how we try to recover after a war. So we have had, Sarvodaya has been at the forefront of peace building and reconciliation also in Sri Lanka. So now we have celebrated 65 years. So 60th anniversary was celebrated in 2018, and my father was very much still active and was leading the movement. So it was a new beginning for Sarvodaya, because 60 marking the life of an organization for 60 years, I think is a major achievement. And since then, we have had major challenges, that is COVID-19 and then the economic crisis in Sri Lanka, which brought almost the entire country into a halt. And then again, the Sarvodaya's need was very deeply felt. So because we had this decentralized, large numbers of villages connected to the movement, we were able to build their resilience. So we have, our model is to enable them to be able to somehow survive any external, social, economic or other challenges that they face, until collective action can be changed at national level also to change things. So today, after about 2 years of severe economic downturn, we are now trying to regain our system. So there, Sarvodaya again plays a very important role. During that period, we were looking after children who were malnourished, because there was a serious problem of food insecurity, and that affected many vulnerable groups in Sri Lanka, the women, the lactating women, pregnant women, the children, school-going children. So we had a massive community-based nutritional support program, and we were working with the government as well as UN organizations like UNICEF. So today we are very vibrant as a national development and humanitarian organization. All this was possible because of my father's vision. He really could see decades ago what development should look like, and of course our government policies didn't follow that those ideals, and that's why we ended up in having a war. So we have 3-4 leadership layers in our organization now, and we work with many other partner organizations as well. So that is in summary the work of Sarvodaya, and we all are deeply committed to continuing his mission and also promoting his legacy by serving humanity both in Sri Lanka and elsewhere.
Vidya, could you tell us something about the financial system, financial vision of Ariyaratne, about the microfinancing, microfinancing, and in order to keep or to attain self-sustainability on the economic
Yes.
platform, because
Yes.
Ariyaratne used to say that it is his own idea, even though it is sometimes referred to what was his name, Tani? Forgot his name. I have the book. Never
So anyway,
mind.
I
Tell
will,
us,
yes,
tell
I
us
will,
about it.
yes, yeah. So basically, as I referred to earlier, so we have this holistic model of development where we mobilize communities and they form their own community-based organization called the Sarvodaya Shramadana Society. And they have a legal status. They get incorporated under the Societies Ordinance of Sri Lanka. So it is really a very democratic grassroots organization, and the economic programs of Sarvodaya don't start until this social foundation is very strongly built. And my father called it building the psychological infrastructure before building the physical infrastructure. So when there is a society, and they can then start economic activity. So microfinance actually is only one part of the economic vision of my father. His economic vision was, of course, a sustainable economic model where you practice again the Buddhist principles. Buddha has, there is, of course, a field of Buddhist economics which is put into practice by Sarvodaya. Now, basically, what it means is you try not to go to the too extreme of affluence or extreme of poverty. We reject poverty. We also reject affluence. So it's the middle path. And here you try to address poverty by fulfilling the basic needs of people. And there are 10 basic human needs that we have identified. My father started with environment as the first basic need of communities. Both the physical environment and the psychological environment. So you need to have inner peace, you need to have mindfulness in order to be able to go further to satisfy your needs. So according to the Buddhist principles, in terms of earning an income, there are rightful ethical ways of earning an income. That is fundamental. And you don't endorse professions which kill people or animals, or so non-violence is a fundamental principle, and also intoxication and gambling and all that. So there are what you call the right livelihood. So you have to have that kind of livelihood, and the income that you get, you don't utilize the entire portion of your income. You divide it to 4 portions. You only consume 1/4. 2 portions you invest in something that will also bring return to you. It may be in agriculture, it may be in another industry, something that you invest. And you keep one portion for an emergency. So this was a very simple philosophy. And then based on this philosophy, we create economic opportunities for people to invest. We give them training. We give them, if they require additional funding, that comes as microfinance loans, or now, of course, it has now gone into a little bit higher levels of loans, which are small and medium enterprise loans. So now that whole concept, which started as a small microfinance and savings program, actually loans and credit follow savings. You have to have the habit of saving first. So Sarvodaya introduced children's savings, and where village communities were also managing in a very scientific way. A banking system, a village banking system, was introduced by Sarvodaya since 1980s. So it evolved from a microfinance and savings program into a major financial institution. So of course, we had to come under regulation of the government, central bank, and because we are dealing with the macroeconomy, so that was also not really supportive of this kind of people-based, empowerment-based financial models. So Sarvodaya's economic vision, my father's economic vision, was at times at odds with the macroeconomic model, which is based on capitalist, neoliberal ideals and markets and all that. So, but still we were able to create in a large number of villages this economic model, and an apex organization called Sarvodaya Development Finance was formed, and that is a body which came under central bank regulation from 2013, and now it's one of the leading financial institutions. And the unique feature of that financial institution, the Sarvodaya Development Finance, is that its ownership is by Sarvodaya, which is a charity, which is a development organization, and village level organizations are also shareholders of this company. It's unique, and whatever the surplus, the dividends that come are also going channeled directly into this holistic development activities, which has spirituality at the base.
Yes. Thank you very much. Now, Tani reminded me that Muhammad Yunus from Bangladesh, but it was after. But I know that the principles of this micro financial system was of Ariyaratne. And also, it reminds me, when you are talking about economic atmosphere, that with me he used to talk, and not because I'm a psychologist, about psychological atmosphere. He used to say that when you are coming to a project, you're coming to people, first of all, you have to create a psychological atmosphere. And we talked a lot about what do we mean by psychological atmosphere. I'm asking myself, what is a psychological atmosphere here in Israel, Palestine? But he used to talk a lot about that. And I think that we will come back to you later, but having Tani's contribution to us. And go ahead, Tani.
Hi all, good evening. Very excited to be here and to see Vinya after so many years. And it's really moving to speak about Ari, because he was this really an amazing leader, so human in every aspect you can define humanity, and so both spiritual and so very well spoken in an ability to express his vision, and to really not only express the vision, but really, I think, make it happen. And I think this closing the gap between this ability to envision and to really make it happen, I think is really an amazing characteristics. So I want to say, I won't be long, just also, as he said, we met Ari and Vinya and the Sarvodya movement when we were leading a strategic task force after the tsunami of 2004. It was really sponsored by the JDC, the Jewish Distribution Committee, who was trying to assist broken communities after, as I said, the tsunami of 2004. And Sarvodya was identified by the JDC as a very strong transformational force, as you heard up to now, very capable of leading a systemic, nationwide, top-down and bottom-up complex process. And my very strong impression, first impression of Sarvodya was really a huge network of communities, all or most of them self-governed on the one hand, but part of a huge network, very well organized, both bottom-up and top-down. And I think this was really, for me, a new form of organizing, which was a combination of a so very well-structured social movement with top-down, in a sense, delivering services, with a huge bottom-up political as well as people movement, but which is bottom-up. Sorry, the first was top-down, and this is, of course, bottom-up. And trying to see how this huge organization works was really, really impressive from the beginning. Although the need was huge after the tsunami, I think that besides the great help that in that project the JDC was offering to mitigate the urgent needs, at the first impression, the main request for our assistance, and it was at the first impression in a sense not totally aligned with the sense of urgency, was to re-envision or design or implement the next step of the education system of the organization. So here is an organization in a crisis, and it asks you, with the assistance of developing an education system or reinventing the education system, it's not really totally aligned. But I think once you understand Sarvodya, you understand how this request is so symbolic, because it emphasizes how education is really the core pillar of Sarvodya's philosophy, and possibly perceived as the only source for regaining the self-efficacy, skills, power to self-govern yourself, your family, your community, and the entire nation in this turbulent state. If I can quote, so 2 quotes, it says it is a process of awareness and consciousness that moves individual communities to understand the dynamic of social development and to participate in the process of improving their own well-being. So it's not about teaching, it's about empowering, it's about creating the ability to take, really to self-govern. And this is what is it, and an educated community understands its problems and challenges and analyzes the factors, social, economic, political, that cause them. They thus feel a real need within themselves to solve them. And for this purpose, they need to organize themselves and rise as a force. So really, education is the core pillar. And we were really requested to try to lead a task force to try and re-envision, redesign a network of educating the entire education system. So initially we had in mind, using maybe Western thinking, the term of university, or rural university, which we had in mind. And not only because regulation issues of whether we can use the term or not can use the term. I think then the term that really Ari, I think, emphasized, which was much more unique and much more accurate, was creating an institution of higher learning, and not higher education, but higher learning. And I think this process of taking the learning into a higher grade or to a higher level has a lot of meanings. So we asked, what does this higher learning mean? And of course, there were growing needs huge needs in terms of the tsunami and the complexity that was needed to support all these needs on the one hand. Second, it was already huge, a network of communities, some self-governed, and they need to take their learning or their education to a next step of being more broad, being more complex, being more wider, understanding the context, combining the theory and the practice, combining their knowledge, because it's they as you heard from Vinya, so much knowledge was in the ground, and the Savonia believes that the people have the knowledge, not the teachers in the sense have the knowledge, which is of course true. The only thing is how to bring it up, how to make it collaborative, how to make it shared, how to really make it work in this entire process. So it was really in mitigating the needs, it was in answering the expansion of this huge organization. It was developing mechanism of learning, bottom up, sharing knowledge, creating learning communities, creating knowledge sharing, etc., and how do we all do this all together? So after a big process of thinking, which was very collaborative, with I think hundreds of people taking part of it in all over Sri Lanka, we composed this concept of Sarvodaya Institute of Higher Learning, and we were launching this concept or this institution. I won't go deep into it, but just when we were trying to design the vision of this concept, we were saying it should be a nationwide sustainable community of learning and practice, spreading common ideology, sharing best practices, and developing together next practices across sectors and across, hopefully, national borders, thereby enhancing, sustaining self-sufficiency, self-governance of the rural population in villages and neighborhoods, and promoting social changes and advance social order. So it really was the vision of how do you create a learning structure, a learning system, a learning mechanism that really can empower communities, empower leaders of communities in both. And this was also a big challenge because there were a lot of faculties, different sectors or different contents which we had to create the knowledge and to create specialized centers on the one hand, and then the other to create a network of, as Vinya said, communities, Shaumadana societies, and creating the school of societies, developing their ability to self-govern. So we really created the system of trying to combine a structure of faculties which have the different expertise in the different areas of life, economics, agriculture, education, welfare, etc., on the one hand, and the other creating a school for these societies to really be able to learn how together to re-govern their communities, how to take their communities to the next step, how to develop their vision, concrete plans for their village, for their community, and to really make it happen through an educational process. I won't, again, go deeper into the entire process we led, but I just want to say that another, I think, very symbolic thing was that the main campus we designed was in Bandaragama. It's a center which was part of the Sarvodaya system, but it really was, I think, to some extent in a ruined state. And we were just walking around this center, and together with architects and together with all parts of the members of the community, and we were trying to envision how this center could look like. And just to mention how humanistic this organization was, we were trying to raise metaphors or to see what metaphors we could see for envisioning this center. And of course, one of them was the families with the different levels of Bandaragama, like a grandparent trying to not oversee, but trying to create some kind of ecosystem supporting the different levels of the family, and also metaphors of nature, of trees, being the villages, being the roots that not in the top, but roots of this organization, that from which the organization really can grow. So this process of planning bottom up, I think, and trying to see how this really huge process of taking this enormous knowledge and trying to circulate it among the different among the network, I think was a huge process. Also spiritual, cognitive, and combining the ability to take theory and to develop it into practice. I just want to end by again quoting Ari from a speech he gave called "Are We Addressing Real Issues in Our Educational Institutions?" And he was saying that from him, the most important thing, besides, of course, besides or beyond papers or theories, more importantly, he said that, 1 minute, but much more importantly is a measurable impact on improving the quality of life of the poor, whether in Sri Lanka or wherever, indicated by the extent to which they are able to meet their basic human needs. So the role of education systems, universities, whatever, are not only to develop new knowledge, but really to create an impact which helps people give answers to their basic needs. So it was a real pleasure to really to serve this huge, super, on the one hand, complicated and developed organization, but on the other hand, very hands-on, very bottom-up, so really natural and humanistic. So thank you.
Thank you, Tani. So I would like to come back to you, Vinya, and hear from you how do you see your father as a leader, a local leader and global leader? Tell us something about Ariyaratne's leadership. And yeah, also later I will ask you also about his being a leader in time of war, but begin with these two, local and global leader.
Yes, I think for me, and I think for overwhelming majority of people in this country, he is an outstanding leader. He was totally committed to his vision, and he was not scared at all. And he believed that people had potential. Every human being had potential, and this country had potential. And it was a matter of really bringing together all these resources in one direction based on a vision of holistic development. And he never deviated from his principles at any cost. He believed in non-violence, and he never compromised that. He never believed that solution could be found to the war by having counter-violence. Although we see that the war is over, it was a military defeat of a separatist group, but we know the underlying forces are still there, and the violence is manifested in various other ways. Even though we don't have a shooting war going on, there's a lot of crimes. The mental health is affected. There's suicide, and so we have to clearly go on that path of peaceful, non-violent transformation of our society. And then he also inspired so many people, so many leaders. He created so many leaders. So therefore he was never keeping the leadership to himself, but then several generations were inspired, and he developed and groomed them. And also he could really see results. He could show results. He could demonstrate that poverty could be eliminated. The malnutrition could be overcome. And there could be mechanisms where people take ownership for their own efforts, and then can transform their communities towards self-development. So that is really the kind of leadership. And then he could relate to the other leaders in the society, though he, including the politicians to academics, to everyone respected him because he was very steadfast in standing on the grounds of the philosophy that he practiced. And therefore, I think we don't have a leader of his caliber who was totally committed to the kind of society he wanted to build. And it was also demonstrated by the fact that for the post-independent history of Sri Lanka, other than certain artists who had contributed so much, for a civil society leader to be given a state funeral, that marks also the respect that the country, the leaders had for him from both the governing party and also from the opposition. So he kept very neutral in politics, and he could still be an outstanding leader. And globally, of course, now these slogans like sustainable development are all mainstream, but 30-40 years ago he articulated these principles of sustainable development. So I think there are many leadership lessons that we can learn from him. I think there's a question from Eve.
Yes, Eve, what did you want to tell us?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to change your program. It's just that our power is going on and off because of trees falling down last night. And I don't know how long, therefore, the power will stay on. But I wanted to just tell you, because, of course, Bernie Glassman felt so close to him. He just admired him so much. And there are a couple of just stories and scenes that have stayed in my mind so strongly with Ari. One of them is in the 1980s. We were just all in Yonkers building a bakery, a Grayston bakery. And most of the people who worked there were, at that point, it was mostly African Americans. And there were a few people from Latin America, mostly illegal people who came illegally. And once a month, we would all come together, all the staff, the bakers, the people who built homes, homeless families, we all come together. Well, one day Ari came. And Bernie said, "Oh, it's so nice. Today you're here and we're all coming together. So why don't you speak to everybody?" Now, this is an audience. Everybody's there. And, it's like people, bakers with white and full of chocolate cream spots on them because they were baking. And you had childcare workers and people, again, from really very low income. And in front of them comes this short man and wearing whites. And he gets up and, some of the bakers especially, they were big guys. And they're looking at him like, "Who are you?" They're not used to seeing a one like that. And what I remember very keenly is that there was a man in the back called Alex, and he was an illegal immigrant to America from somewhere in South America. So as Ariyaratne started speaking and talking about values, after about 10 minutes, he interrupted him, this man, Alex. And he wanted to say, "Okay, but if I don't have money and my family is back in South America, what do I do? All your talk is very nice, but what do I do?" And
It's 1:00.
I can't remember the rest of the conversation, but imagine the scene. There is Ariyaratne in front, and there's back behind this really big guy who is really challenging him and talking, each one is talking English with a very different accent. And I was so moved by how Ari communicated with him. Completely across culture, across educational level. It was really, it's like historical, and it happened almost 40 years ago, and I cannot forget that scene. And the other thing that I also remember, some years later, Ari came kind of suddenly. We didn't expect him, and Bernie was not in town. So some of the senior staff of Grayston took him out to lunch. and we were going to go to a vegetarian restaurant, but it was closed. So we took him next door to an Italian mafia restaurant. I remember everyone knew in Yonkers this was owned by the mafia. And we had to explain to him this restaurant. So we're sitting there, and this was at the time when Ari was trying to get all these hundreds of thousands of people to meditate, if you remember. I think they had something like 800,000 people coming to meditate. And I was sitting next to him and I asked him, so tell me, what difference do you think this is going to make that you have 800,000 or even 1 million people meditating? And he believed it was going to make a big difference. And he said to me, sometimes things look very bad and everybody says, oh, there's no use or there's no hope. But as long as some people keep this vision, they keep it and they keep it in very hard time, you'll see things start changing and things start changing and they increase with numbers and they increase with numbers. And at some point, just all it takes is just a little bit, and there's a big change. And people don't understand. They're so impressed by the big change, but they don't understand that this big change has been building up for a long time, slowly and sometimes invisibly, because it was held by just a few people. So I remember that conversation in the Italian mafia restaurant. And finally, I'll just say, and this is with a smile, we visited him in Sri Lanka, in Colombo, and or right outside Colombo, and we talked. And at that point, we were there because we were in India, actually, and there was going to be a big global Buddhist meeting. And Bernie asked him, well, are you going to the big Buddhist meeting? You're such a great leader. And he says, no, they don't want an activist like me. That's what he said. They don't want an activist like me. Because at that point, especially Buddhism in Asia was so, it was in a very different way from Ari. And I remember those words, they don't want someone like me. And it made me very sad. And it kind of, well, I think it inspires us to do differently in the West. So I just wanted to share that because those stay in my mind, those wonderful scenes with Ariyaratne.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Eve,
you.
for sharing.
Thank you, Eve. Thank you so much. Yeah, very, very exciting. Every story, I feel like tearful. But still, he got many rewards, no, Vinya? Finally, the world appreciated him, no?
Yes, so he from the 1960s, the Ramon Magsaysay Award from Philippines, 1969 for community leadership. That was his first award, and then since then the Gandhi Peace Prize and King Baudouin Prize from Belgium and many other international recognition he received, and also the Nivano Peace Prize from Japan. So he remained very humble and down to earth. I think that was his unique quality. He never, had this ego enhanced by receiving all this, and he got the highest recognition from the government of Sri Lanka as well, called Sri Lanka Abhimanya. That is the highest award for a living individual. That the state, it's a state, not the government, state recognition. And so later in his life, I mean, he has also faced so much oppression by governments throughout the period that he built Sarvodaya. But he was also recognized finally for all the work that he did. Yeah.
Yeah, but still he was very humble and modest, and yes. Okay, we are the last thing that I would like you to share, if you are, maybe two things. One, about his leadership in time of war, and then about your relationship with him, and being the follower, but also being Vinya by yourself.
So his leadership role during the war, he did everything when the war after the first incident of violence in 1983, even before that in 1970s, he could see that this ethnic strife would emerge as a very violent phenomenon in the country. So he created Shanti Sena, the Peace Brigade of Sarvodaya, in late 1970s. And then in 1983, unfortunately, it took a very violent trend, and with some incidents that happened in July 1983. And his response was, he was fearless, and he was helping the victims, the Tamil civilians who were attacked by mobs. And our family was the first to go and help these people, start up camps for the displaced, and then so he met with the Tamil leaders, and he also intervened with the president at that time, and really showed his leadership qualities, and how he was acceptable to all communities in Sri Lanka. And since then, he has been leading peace marches and always asking the parties to resolve this in a non-violent way. But of course, at different times, he directly intervened. He went to, while the war was going on, even during the time when we had the Indian peacekeeping force. So he was on the ground and really trying to intervene to resolve the conflict peacefully until the war ended. And also brought different, religious communities together, and he was really facilitating interreligious dialogues, and from grassroots level up to the highest level of the chief prelates of the Buddhist chief prelates, as well as from the bishops, the cardinal, all these people, the main religious leaders in the country, and was a neutral figure who was acceptable to everyone. So when it comes to my own self, it was very much, he asked me to, get involved in Sarvodaya a little prematurely in my career. That was in 1998. I was practicing medical doctor, and I was an academic. And then there were challenges, and the organization was in a transition. And I happily, took over the responsibilities. So this year, it's nearly 25 years since I made that decision. So even though I became the president only in 2018, I served as the executive director for 10 years, from 2000 to 2010, and then from 2010 to 2018 as the general secretary, while grooming the next leadership, the executive director, and now we have another young executive director, Mr. Damit Kulanayaka, is joining this call. So I took over as the president in 2018, while he was very much active and was still he of course remained until his death the leader of the movement, and the main guiding light for all of us. So I had always, till the very last breath, I was with him. And I'm very proud and happy about it, because I took the responsibility, and it was a very challenging time. It was the war, then the tsunami, then again other disasters, then organizational challenges. So I worked very closely with him, and I gave him very little sort of headache. I took most of the troubles to myself, and I only shared the best part, because we wanted him to, including my brothers and sisters, we wanted him to be happy in the last years of his life. And I think for me, as the eldest son, who is the only one in the family who was working full-time for the movement, I thought it was my duty. He had done enough for the country, he has done enough for family to the world, and so he should have a peaceful and a joyful time. And I think last 5, 6 years, he was just relaxing. But I had a very close relationship with him, had meals almost every day, because he enjoyed having us, the children and the grandchildren around. And so I could also, have a very light moments with him, not discussing organizational matters. But in very difficult times also, like when I face challenges, I used to go and ask him for guidance. Until the very last few weeks, I think I relied on certain things for his guidance. And he doesn't talk too much on matters, and he will just give one clue. That's how he is. And then with my experience with him, and the experience I had with the organization, I knew exactly what he meant, and that was the solution. So I have deep closeness to him, respect for him, and we had our own sort of differences in opinion in certain strategic matters, but that's how it is, because I belong to a different generation and the context was different. So I took some bold decisions in sometimes I took which were not fully endorsed by him. So only history will judge whether those decisions were correct or not. But I remain totally committed to continuing, not just myself but all the others who are part of the movement, to continue this mission and his legacy.
Thank you very much, Vinya. So I open the floor if someone wants to ask, to add, to bring some contribution, sharing. Richard?
Yes, I just
Oh,
wanted
Jeff?
to say, Vinya, it's good to see you. I got confused about the time zone.
Good to
Sorry.
see you. Good to see you,
Well,
Richard. My goodness, so nice that you could join.
yeah, I'm so happy to see you. I just want to tell everybody, I was in Sri Lanka for 6 months in 2022 during the protests, and I know this is about Ari, but I want to make it about Vinya because I watched him, how he dealt with such intense, it was like more of a economic and political, like just huge events. And I just want to tell you, Vinya, thank you for what you're doing. Yeah, your father would be really proud.
Yeah. Thank you, Richard. Thank you very much.
I can follow
Very,
this line
very.
and say, I can follow this line and saying, again, giving a lot of gratitude to Vinya, because as you said, it's 25 years that you're managing and leading this organization, and has taken so many big steps and leap forwards, which I think you are so much accountable for. So it's really also in these past 20 years, really a joint I think leadership, with Ari being the philosopher or the big spirit behind, but I think with you really transforming these ideas to concrete, huge steps forward. And I think it's very amazing. So thank you as well, as standing as a very strong leader, and I think spiritual as well as functional in your own.
Thank
Yes.
you.
We have about
Jeff?
15 minutes, friends. If you'd like to ask a question or comment, and if you have your camera on, we can see your hand. But if your camera's off, and a lot of people have their camera off, you can go down under React or Reactions, and there's an electronic hand down there, and then we can see you.
Yes. Nice to see you, Demish.
Yes, very nice to meeting you all. So I think it's my bound duty also to contribute my experience in Sarvodaya. And thank you very much for the opportunity given. And so I consider joining Sarvodaya was actually, it was a meritorious opportunity for me. uh, I mean that I was in another sector completely which was different, and I was fortunate enough to serve to the Sarvodaya Sramadana movement, which is considered as the largest and oldest civil society organization in Sri Lanka. So as well as it is most touchful for me, the concept and the philosophy that was created by late Dr. A.T. Ariyaratne. It is an holistic and integrated development model to entire community in the Sri Lanka or the world, which can be practically practiced to empower the maybe as the individual, as the family, as the village, as urban, and as a nation, even as a whole world. So that it is nurtured with the Lord Buddha's and great Gandhian philosophy, and especially the development model, 5-stage graduation development model to the village that was introduced to be self-reliant and self-ruling. So that is another uniqueness of Dr. A.T. Ariyaratne, and all the generations have been happily getting engaged with. I mean that in all the community services, which is not only for the human being but also to the entire ecosystem. So we, as the young generation and the next generation, so we are bound to, I mean that we are committed to take that concept to the island wide. And also I want to add, even if you consider these 6 dimensions, starting from spiritual, moral, cultural, social, economic, and political dimensions. So in the Sarvodaya, we have internal as well as independent, specialized unit to execute all these dimensions. So that is the specialty and the uniqueness in Sarvodaya, which was founded by Dr. A.T. Ariyaratne. So each and every dimension accounts for to empower the community in different ways. Even if you take our International Peace and Meditation Center, that is our spiritual arm. Even if you get the Shanti Sena, that is our youth development arm. Even if you get the women's movement, so that is our women's empowerment arm. Even if you get the Swasthita Society, so that is from the, I mean that it's from the infant up to the most elder person in the Sri Lanka, whoever the assistance are needed. So that society is there to cater that one. Not only to that one, so going beyond that one, so the greatest economic, I mean, that concept has been introduced by late Dr. A.T. Ariyaratne. That is how the economy could be managed in dharmic way. So that is the uniqueness. So if you'd have heard about that one, the sutra called that Sigalo Vada. So so it has been taught how we could utilize our income. So one part we have to utilize if you divide into 4 parts. So another 2 parts you have to, I mean, that take for the investment, and the last part, so you have to keep to take it for an emergency. So that was the economic concept he introduced to the Sri Lanka, and even if you take, which is practically and realistically practiced in the grassroots level, so by our Sarvodaya Sramadana societies. So we have over 5,300 societies across the country, out of which about 600 to 700 are in really active mode. So if you even visit to those societies, you all can practically experience how our community have been self-reliant and self-ruling through this great concept which was introduced by late Dr. A.T. Ariyaratne. And now the baton has been taken by our Dr. Vinya Ariyaratne. So the Dr. Vinya was the president for the Sri Lanka Medical Association for last year, and rendered a lot of services in terms of the medical services in Sri Lanka. And he has been leading us to render this community service mainly about under 10 sectors. So, and we are really empowered and really lucky to be in this organization. So thank you very much for giving this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Demi. So I think we are close to finish, to the end. Yes. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Tani. Thank you, Jeff, Chloe. Thank you very, very much, Vinya. And I promise to visit during I think in half a year, Tani, is it okay? We'll do
Thank
stuff
you.
again. Oh,
Thank you,
yes.
Iris. Thank you, Tani, and also Jeff and Chloe for organizing this. And we'll keep in touch. And we are all sharing a similar vision of a better world based on spiritual values. So we'll continue with our journey and hope to be connected to all of you. Thank you. Good night.